AWS, Amazon Web Services, a massive cloud crash which disrupted the internet for millions of people. What we found was it was a widespread outage that caused disruption for millions of users. The impact was on social media and communications, chat, Snapchat, Signal, Zoom, Slack, Reddit, gaming, Roblox, PlayStation networks, Amazon's own services like their shops online, Alexa. Don't start responding smartphones that are listening, voice activated speakers that are listening to this. Prime Video, which I noticed there was still some backlog on Prime a few days later. Financial and corporate, government and public sector in the UK's National Rail Service, NHS sites, and on and on and on. So Emily, this is very similar outage in scale, if you remember, but I think actually disrupting more to Meta's BGP outage in 2021, if you remember that.
I do. I remember that vividly. And, you know, there is a phrase in cybersecurity, it's always the DNS. And I think in Amazon's case, it was the DNS. I think there was a blank record uploaded to a key field. But there was also a domino effect. And as you said, Luz, there's been a real difference in recovery. So it would be interesting to kind of unpack that a little bit. Major difference between Meta and AWS. Meta, you know, everybody's on Meta's services on the social media stuff, but Meta goes down and you just don't have WhatsApp, you don't have Instagram, you don't have Facebook. But if AWS goes out, you don't have millions of different services because they are an infrastructure provider. And isn't it amazing what an incredible array of services depend on them? So from Lloyds Bank to smart beds to Wordle, you know, let's have a moment to think about the poor Wordle addicts, one of whom lost their 210-day streak as a result of this, you know. So there's a lot of suffering. The 8 Sleep company, so the smart bed, actually I looked at their website. I think I want a smart bed, actually, but this is like a science fiction horror movie when your smart device turns against you. And just so people were reporting that their smart bed was stuck upright and boiling hot.
Were any, just for people listening, were lives lost? Were people actually boiled to death by their bed?
No.
But, I mean, I think you'd have a pretty rubbish sleep if you were stuck upright at, like, 27 degrees all night.
I don't know.
I think you'd be feeling a bit rubbish the next day.
And if you're listening, please correct me on this. I heard Victorians used to sleep upright by choice.
I think it's just what you're used to, though. If you were sat, it's like go to sleep now in your chair, I think you'd struggle.
Well, as you get older, you get better at doing things like going to sleep in your chair.
This is
by
great.
accident.
So we're not making anything up, and we're not riffing because we've really prepared for this week. But when we look at this specific error, and I was just listening to you talking about the Facebook outage, which was a BGP routing error in routing tables at the DNS level. But I've been listening to the commentary this week about it, and they were saying, well, this is an application error rather than an internet layer because it's to do with their DynamoDB distribution of addresses. But and then they were, you know, and you were talking about the Meta problem as it was referred to as a sort of BGP internet layer error, but in fact it hit most people on the application layer. I think they're both the opposite way round. I think what we've got here is a DNS record affecting a bad record. They called it a latent defect, a hidden fault, and what's called a race condition creating a problem. So you didn't
What does that mean?
Well, you got two different sources of truth competing with each other and creating uncertainty with poor record keeping.
I did feel for, I just want to, you know, I read and really tried to understand the AWS advisory
Yes.
that has been widely referred to, and all I just thought was, oh, an engineer who is incredibly stressed out and probably hadn't slept for 3 days wrote this, because, you know, I work in tech. I'm not a technologist, but I literally couldn't understand a word of it. Luce, did you have a look at the Amazon advisory? Can you explain to us what actually happened?
Yeah, what you have is DNS records that point to things. So they're like signposts on the street. So you type in something and it resolves. It's like a signpost on a street saying, well, how do I get to Oxford? Oh, it's that way. Okay. But if you've got an empty signpost on the street and the signpost has nothing on it and you're trying to get to
Don't know
Oxford,
where to go.
you'll wander about and you become a slow piece of data looking for something. Now, what that signpost, and it's very critical, was pointing to was their DynamoDB NoSQL servers that are actually
And I've heard of DynamoDB, but I don't know what it
It's
is.
a database and it's an object-orientated
And
dynamic.
AWS disabled the DynamoDB DNS Planner and DNS Enactor automation as they're fixing it. But it's,
and they needed to do that to kind of reset the internet and all its. But what's happened is people are actually using Amazon Web Services as bits and pieces of their service. So they've got hyperscaling storage of files, images, and all that.
Like Duolingo.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you don't really think like that's not an Amazon thing, but it's like it uses Amazon Web Services to support it.
Yeah.
Its
Yeah.
infrastructure.
So it's done the front end and it outsources all of the back end, the compute and the storage to
AWS.
somebody else.
And what DynamoDB does, and it's very clever and it's great, it's a great system, is it stores what's called state. And so it stores authentication creds. It stores particular state of something. It lets you know where assets are everywhere. And
So like where you are in your Duolingo language learning journey.
That's
level
right, correct.
7.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the core seed DNS record failed to point to the DynamoDB server. And so there was no index, there was no lookup. It's like, you know, I'm going to go to the library and find a book. There's no library. You know, where can I go?
Or a
And then
delivery
you-
driver
so
is
it is-
delivering your parcel.
So it's like when you're in a supermarket and you think something's in an aisle and you're just wandering up and down. So that's the slow bits of data that you're describing. And of course, I guess a service like Amazon Web Services, there will be many services and people calling on it every second.
Yeah,
right?
and what we found was that the failure of the DynamoDB API endpoint was catastrophic, because that is a foundational tier 0 service that many other critical AWS services depend upon for their own operations, particularly within the USA East 1 region, where we have a lot of assets and we serve a lot of cloud services from. So it really kind of impacted everyone. What it comes to again, and we see it in cybercrime as well and threats online, is that, you're really depending upon the DNS and the domain name system as a very, very fundamental point of trust and location. And if you get this wrong, and they're really, this area, the sort of the operations and the DevOps around this when you do changes, I mean, it's really hard to roll back out of, because a lot of assets spread those DNS records over the internet and they cache them for a period of time to make the internet more efficient. And what you end up with, if you're in a problem, you can't roll back out of it, because some servers may cache your duff
Your
DNS
rubbish
records
record.
for a period until they search
Yeah,
again. So
I phoned up a restaurant yesterday to try and book a table, and they said, because on whatever service they use, like OpenTable or something like that, it was showing as fully booked. And I thought, oh, I'll just phone them up. And they said, oh, yeah, no, it's just not come back to life since the AWS outage.
And I wanted to just, so in this age of concentration and dependency, we were talking, you've talked in the past at university and seminars about the low promise of internet technology. The TCP/IP works brilliantly, but there is no service level, there is no promise. It's about alternative routing, and it's about a very loose network. Here we're moving towards a very brittle internet, wouldn't you say, which isn't tolerant of these faults, with this concentration.
It's really back to internet the internet concept was about breaking away from those centralized nodes like a broadcasting network where you invade a country, you go straight to the national broadcaster, you blow it up, and then they've got the whole population has no information about what's happening. So
there was
the
a comment
internet
from Dr. Soulette Dreyfus from the University of Melbourne, who's an information systems lecturer, saying the single point isn't just AWS. They're the biggest cloud provider with 30% or so of the market, but rather the cloud as a whole, which is basically just 3 companies.
I think that's right. But I was also thrown back to thinking about the original concept of the internet is this. It looks like a fishing net. So your packets will be tracing whatever journey they can from A to B across this whole network. You take out a whole load of it, it still works. Well, what we see is that everybody is using cloud services, and I want to come back to why they are. And there are 3 major companies. Now, I'm going back to my very old and out-of-date competition law. You're in European competition law back when I was studying it, so it's probably out of date. Circumstances of perfect competition would be where you had 4 providers. So actually having 3 is not that far off, but it's so far off from the original concept of let 1,000 flowers bloom. But why is it that people are using cloud services, Lucian?
DDoS.
Yeah, it's because, and why is it that small businesses are driven to using cloud services? Is because you don't want to be getting up in the middle of the night to go down to Reading to whack the server with a hammer to try and get it to work again.
Been there many times.
You've been there many times. We do software, we don't do hardware. And also all of the cybersecurity advice about how to be more secure, how to get through vendor assessments in large companies is to outsource all of that difficult stuff to people who really know what they're doing. And so it's, people have been driven to this. And there's analysis by scholars like Tim Wu going back, over a decade, where he says the history of communications technology starts really open. The telegraph, the telephone, film, TV, all started in the same way. And within about a decade or so, they become incredibly concentrated because that's what happens.
Thank you. I certainly don't miss travelling to Reading, though I love Reading, kind of.
Who doesn't?
Yes, who doesn't? Great John Lewis there, great shopping centre. But the distributed denial of service attack is a nightmare for the small player, and it's just not been resolved. So we all run into the mafia-protected arms of Cloudflare, who are providing free protection if you work inside their nightclub. I love them. I actually love them. And the cloud services, which give you more reliable, scalable stuff, while those cloud services are doing their routing tables properly. Alice, another slight twist on this, and that was great remembering of some lecture stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
What are the options for digital natives during such colossal outages? These are people that are almost psychologically dependent upon their phone and internet services. Is it realistic to ask people to weed the garden?
Yeah, well, you see, I began today by saying I haven't done as much prep as I'd usually do. I'm reading some facts off my phone, and that was met with oh, we're not meant to say that, but it's that's the reality of life now. We can all I was looking up the AWS, and I was looking at the Guardian for just kind of their perspective, and there was an article of I've just had the most wonderful day. This is what it's like to have a tech-free life, and I'm like, cool, but also it's we're going to look back on this as it's so I'm just so superior to everybody because I had a car-free day or I had a telephone-free day, and it's just kind of cool, you do you.
I see. So it's this sort of new hippie sort of thing. Is somebody who
rejects. Well, there's stuff of people who go on holiday and they leave their phone and they disconnect, and it's great, good for you. The reality of modern civilization, and it's all. Young people like their phones. It's we all are dependent 100% on technology now.
Did you notice
life
the
without
outage?
it? It's interesting because the Wi-Fi in our house has been rubbish. So I just assumed, when stuff doesn't work, you're just like, oh, the Wi-Fi's not working. And it was just for like really specific apps that you would never make a connection between in your mind of like, Snapchat, Duolingo. You're kind of like, I don't know what.
I got bored of shopping seriously, but folks out there, a Dre Tech router is quite a good Wi-Fi based system as well. So I find that can give you more.
Well, we've now got new
results.
Wi-Fi, and so then I was able to confirm that it was in fact a systemic global problem and not the problem with the Wi-Fi in my house.
I'd like to get a psychiatrist and a therapist onto the internet seriously to explore this at a later date in more depth. My partner yesterday was actually getting a bit snippy with me for not giving attention. So then I turned that around and started to give attention, and they were on their phone, but that is kind of attention, I suppose.
I did hear some of the commentary going to your virtue signalling thing was that a lot of tech workers were like, it's a snow day for us, like a free day off, and the huge relief as well. So I would say, as well as the virtue signalling, I'm a better person, there's also somewhat relief in being able to switch off sometimes.